What I'm about to tell you is not a confession. It's a warning. Because what happened to me could happen to anyone, especially to those who believe their greatest support is their own family. I spent my entire life working hard. I never took what wasn't mine. I never wronged anyone. I never imagined that my enemies would be living inside my own home. This story didn't begin suddenly. It was built slowly, so quietly, that by the time I began to suspect something, it was already too late. One day, I heard a sentence, just one sentence, and that single sentence shattered everything inside me. That was the day I realized that some people benefit more from your death than from your life. I didn't raise my voice. I didn't ask questions. I didn't tell anyone that I had understood everything. Because I knew one thing. If I spoke, I would lose. And if I stayed silent, the game would come into my hands. This is not a story about murder. This is a story about patience, about calculation, and about the moment when greed finally exposes itself. Listen till the end, because the ending I witnessed was something even I never planned. Today, I am 68 years old, but the day my life truly began to break apart, I was 52. That is the age when people believe they have finally achieved everything, when years of hard work begin to pay off, when life slowly starts moving toward comfort and peace. I believed that too. I considered myself fortunate because I had started from poverty and reached respect, wealth, and trust. My story is not about shortcuts. I spent my youth sleeping on office floors, my nights buried in files, and my days begging clients for one more chance. It was a small company. People laughed at it. No big name, no big capital, no powerful backing. There was only one thing: my hard work. Every single day, I made one promise to myself: I will not give up today. Years passed, the company grew, and the same people who once ignored me now depended on my time. With time, everything changed. The offices became bigger, the name became known, the bank balance reached numbers I had never even dreamed of. Houses were built, cars arrived, luxuries entered my life, the kind I had only seen in movies. But despite all of that, I believed I was richest because my son was with me. My daughter-in-law lived under my roof, and I thought I had built a strong family. My son and daughter-in-law lived with me. I deliberately chose not to live separately because I believed real success was keeping the family together. I involved them in every decision. I credited them for every success, and quietly, I was preparing myself for retirement. I planned to hand everything over: the business, the property, the responsibilities. I imagined myself stepping back and living simply as a father. I was certain I had taught my child respect, patience, and loyalty. I never even imagined that the greatest danger was not outside this world, but breathing inside my own home. I believed enemies were those who envied you, who couldn't compete, who couldn't tolerate your success. I never knew that the real enemies are often the ones sitting closest to your success. That night felt like any other. The house was quiet.
I was lying in my room, somewhere between sleep and wakefulness. Perhaps those are the moments when human hearing becomes sharper, when the mind captures even the smallest sounds. I heard my son's voice coming from the other room. He was on the phone. His voice was low, but the words were clear. At first, I didn't pay attention. Then I heard one sentence that froze my entire body. He said, "Enough now. He's very old. If he dies, everything will be ours." My heartbeat suddenly raced. I held my breath as if a single movement would reveal that I was listening. My ears locked onto the door, and then came the words that split my entire life into two halves. He said he had planned everything, that the death would look natural. In that moment, 50 years of hard work flashed before me. The days I dropped him at school, the nights I stayed awake for his fees, the prayers I had made for him. Blood was still flowing in my body, but something inside me had died. I could have opened the door. I could have screamed. I could have told everyone. But I didn't speak, because I understood this was not a battle of anger. This was not a fight of shouting. This was a war of patience. And in patience, the one who wins is the one who makes the final move. That very night, I decided I would not become weak. I decided that before I die, I will watch greed expose itself completely. I understood that from now on, this house no longer had a father and a son. It had two enemies, one who believed he was very clever, and the other who was silently watching his every step. He thought I was old, weak, unaware, and I knew my silence was my greatest weapon. That night, the war began. No announcements, no weapons, no witnesses. And I swore in my heart, I will not surrender.
Over the next few months, the atmosphere began to change. But not the way storms arrive in the outside world, loud, violent, and obvious. It changed the way dampness spreads inside the walls of a house, slowly, silently, so quietly that no one notices it at first. On the surface, everything seemed normal. But for me, every passing day carried a new signal, a warning that I was no longer safe. My food and drink were now entirely in my daughter-in-law's hands. She gently told me to rest, said I had grown old, said there was no need for me to tire myself anymore. Her voice was sweet, sweet enough to comfort anyone listening. But beneath that sweetness, I began to sense a hidden cruelty. When she placed a plate in front of me, she would smile. Not the smile of care, but the quiet confirmation of a plan moving forward successfully. At first, the change in taste was subtle. Tea felt unfamiliar, as if the leaves had changed, as if the milk was slightly off. Food carried a bitterness that lingered on my tongue. I tried to reason with myself. Maybe age had changed my sense of taste. Maybe it was all in my head. Maybe I was overthinking. But somewhere deep inside, a bell kept ringing, warning me that this was not imagination. Then came the day when my body spoke the truth. It was an ordinary morning. I had barely taken a few steps when a crushing pain exploded in my chest, as if a fist had clenched around my heart from the inside. My breathing stopped. Darkness closed in before my eyes, and I collapsed right there. The moment was brief, but within it, I felt the weight of my entire life. I was taken to the hospital, into white lights, sharp voices, and humming machines. The doctors studied the reports. They looked at each other and nodded. Their conclusion was clear. They said it was a heart attack because of age, because of stress, because of fate. Everyone sighed with relief, as if the mystery had been solved. But I knew this was not a heart attack. My body was screaming that this was an attack from within. After leaving the hospital, I remained silent. I made no accusations. I asked no questions. I let no one sense my suspicion. Instead, I took my own steps. A few private tests, a few people with no connection to my family, a few reports meant for no one else, only for me. When the report reached my hands, the paper did not tremble. The last illusion inside me did. It said there were traces of arsenic in my blood, a poison that does not kill at once, but slowly, feeding itself day by day until it hollows a person from the inside. Reading this did not shock me, because I already knew the truth. What shocked me was how confident they were, how calm, how certain, believing I understood nothing. My son and daughter-in-law visited me every day. Their faces carried no grief, not the kind a father's illness should bring. Their eyes held calculations, impatience, and a strange sense of waiting. They sat by my bed, asked about my health, and casually shifted the conversation toward company decisions. My son spoke gently, said I should rest now, that he would handle the business, that I no longer needed to worry. I listened, I nodded, and I kept a faint smile on my face, a smile they mistook for weakness, but in reality was my preparation. Inside me, an entirely different strategy was forming. I knew this was no longer just about taking a life. This had become a game of power, patience, and time. And in my heart I said, the curtain has only just begun to lift. The real scene is still waiting. The game has only begun. That day, I made a final decision. Not in anger, not in emotion, but in complete awareness. I decided that I would live, and if someone was dreaming of ending me, I would teach them this one lesson. A calculation done with patience is always the most expensive one. I understood something very clearly. This was not a war of strength. This was a war of the mind. And in this kind of war, the winner is the one who can appear weak. My first move was made in silence. I changed my lawyer. My old lawyer had been with me for years, but by now he had become part of the family as well. And at that moment, I needed someone who belonged only to me, to no one else. The new lawyer was experienced. He spoke little, he listened more, and most importantly, he did not ask questions. He simply worked. I did not tell him the full story. I only said that I wanted to re-examine my affairs. After that, I retrieved every document related to the company: shares, bank accounts, properties, contracts, everything that had been built over decades. I opened every file, checked every signature, and strangely, a sense of calm washed over me when I realized that everything was still in my name. My son believed he was running the company, but the truth was, the control was still in my hands. I had simply never let him feel it. Then I did something no one would ever imagine. I secretly registered a new company. The name was almost the same, with just enough difference that only a careful eye would notice. New accounts, new emails, but the same service, the one that had been my identity for years.
I told no one everything at once. I did everything slowly, exactly the way they were trying to end me, slowly.
I spoke to my old clients. To some, I said it was a new branch. To others, a better system for improved service. To a few, just future planning. My relationships were strong, built on trust. No one questioned me. Files began to shift. Payments started flowing into new accounts, and the original company slowly began to empty, like a body from which the soul is quietly removed. I deliberately changed nothing in the original company. The paperwork stayed. Even some debts were left behind, so everything appeared normal. My son believed business was running fine, that his father was truly weak now, that this was finally his time. He began making his own decisions, parties with friends, a taste for expensive cars. He started enjoying a life he had already claimed, even though the inheritance had not yet happened. And me, I made myself look weaker. I walked slowly, rested more, got tired from small things. Inside the house, I created the impression that illness had broken me. I showed them exactly what they wanted to see. But when night fell, when the house went quiet, I stayed awake. I studied files, built plans, calculated the next moves. They thought I was simply passing time. I knew I was using time in my favor. It was a strange kind of peace, living under the same roof as your enemy, and letting them remain unaware that the ground beneath their feet had already begun to slide away. They laughed, they planned, and I counted. Every day, every step, every mistake they made, all of it was turning in my favor. I knew the end was approaching, but I did not rush, because I also knew this: the one who rushes always loses. This game was now in my hands, and I intended to play it until the very last moment. Time continued to move at its own pace, and no one realized that in reality, two lives were running side by side. One life that everyone could see, and another that existed completely behind the curtain. Both companies were operating at the same time, but the existence of the new company was limited only to me and a few trusted individuals. No one was suspicious. No one felt the need to ask questions, because everyone believed that the real power was still the old company, now in my son's hands. 4 years passed. 4 years in which I made myself appear even weaker, even quieter, even more irrelevant. To my son and daughter-in-law, I was no longer a pillar. I was a burden, a man who was merely breathing, a man whose time had passed. They no longer spoke carefully in front of me, because in their minds, the game was already won. And that was the moment I decided to play my final move. I decided to fake my death. This was not an emotional decision. It was a calculated one. I contacted an old friend of mine, a doctor who had known me for decades. I did not tell him the entire truth. I only said that I needed an arrangement that would end everything, permanently. He looked into my eyes, and perhaps he understood that this matter had gone beyond life and death. The plan itself was simple, but the preparation was complex. A second fake heart attack, hospital admission, the sound of machines, nurses rushing, and then
the moment I would be declared dead. Everything was so close to reality that if I had not looked at myself in the mirror, even I would have believed that I was truly gone. A fake death certificate was prepared, and a funeral was arranged, one with more ritual than grief. I was not present there, but I saw everything. Sitting in a hotel room, through cameras, I watched my own funeral. The people for whom I had devoted my life, the people I once believed were my greatest support. There were no tears on their faces. There was impatience, as if everyone was waiting for an announcement. When the rituals ended, the real faces emerged. My son stood among his friends, and there was no sorrow in his voice, not the kind a man should have after losing his father. He said clearly that now everything belonged to them, as if he had won a competition. My daughter-in-law smiled and said they were finally rich, as if years of effort had rewarded them at last. I sat in front of the screen, watching silently, and not for a single moment did I feel regret. Within days, they took the next step. They decided to sell the company, because for them, business had never been a purpose, only a source of money. But when buyers opened the files, when accounts were examined, when the truth came out, everything changed. The company had no assets, no real clients, no money they had dreamed of. There were only debts, tax notices, and paperwork with no value. The matter reached courts and banks, and those who believed themselves victorious were destroyed in a single blow. My son began wandering in search of a job. The man who had never begged anyone was now explaining himself in interviews. My daughter-in-law started posting crying videos on social media, blaming fate, asking for sympathy. No one knew that the foundation of this ending had been laid by her own actions. And me? I was sitting on a distant island, under a new identity, running my new company. No one there knew my old name. No one recognized my face. I was alive, fully aware, completely free. They believed I was dead, and that belief was their greatest defeat. This was the second twist. What they believed was victory was actually their destruction, and what they believed was my death was the beginning of my new life. I did not kill anyone. I did not raise a hand on anyone. I only gave time. I chose silence, and I allowed greed to destroy itself. That was the real revenge. If one day you begin to feel that your own family has started seeing you as old, that your presence is no longer a support for them, but a burden, that your very breath is an obstacle in their plans, do not panic, do not scream, do not fight, and do not try to become a hero, because in this game, the one who speaks first is the one who loses first. Stay silent, observe, and understand who benefits from your death and who is terrified of your survival. Remember, power does not always exist in youth. Power exists in experience, and experience is the only weapon that sharpens with time. Plan quietly, slowly, intelligently, without leaving a trace. Do not snatch anything. Simply take back what was already yours. One day will come when they believe everything is finally in their hands. They will consider themselves victorious. They will celebrate, and they will forget that the real game is not over yet. And at that very moment, you will return, perhaps without a name, perhaps without a face, but with control. And if fate stands beside you, the ending will not arrive as one twist, but as 3 brutal twists.
one that shocks them, one that breaks them, and one that forces them to spend the rest of their lives wondering where exactly they lost. Because revenge is not always taken with noise. Sometimes revenge matures in silence, and when it finally arrives, it tastes unimaginably sweet.
If this story made you uncomfortable, it was meant to. Stay alert, trust slowly, and remember, the most dangerous enemies don't stand outside your door. They sit at your table. Subscribe for stories they don't want you to hear.